Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Katherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Katherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group, and I am a trainer at the Center for Understanding in Conflict. And I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And I'm thrilled that my guest today is Kate Anthony. She's the author of The D Word, Making the Ultimate Decision About Your Marriage, and host of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. Kate helps women find clarity, strength, and confidence as they navigate one of life's hardest crossroads, guiding them to make empowered choices that put their children at the center, not in the middle. Welcome, Kate Anthony.
Thank you so much for having me, Katherine.
So your book, and a lot of people do sort of refer to divorce as the D word or don't like to use that word, or you find a bunch of other words to mean essentially the same. Maybe I'm really thinking about this, divorce. So that is one of the hardest choices in any marriage as to whether or not to stay or leave, and at what point. So tell us what inspired you to write it, and what do you hope that readers take away from it?
Well, I really was inspired to write it partly because of my own experience, almost 2 decades ago, trying to make the decision. Most people spend, on average, I think about 5 years trying to decide whether to stay or go. So many people are looking for that burning bush, that huge inciting incident, that thing that is over their line, but yet their line keeps kind of moving. And they're waiting to suddenly know, right? Suddenly they're going to know. And when I was going through it, I had asked a good friend of mine who was divorced. I said, well, how do you know when it's finally time to go? And he said, you'll know when you know. And I was like, okay, but the whole point is I don't know. And I'm looking to know, which, by the way, should have been the first clue that probably it was time to go. But it's sort of, I wrote the book as the antidote to when you'll know, because I think there are so many questions that are swirling around the brains. This book is for women. I work with women. A majority of divorces are initiated by women. So there's so many questions that are swirling around the brains of women. They want to know if what they're experiencing is really bad enough, or does it rise to the level or am I being selfish, or is it enough? Is it enough that I just don't want to be married to this person, right? All of these things that are swirling around in their brains that there are answers to, but they may not know where to look. And so I just put them all in one place and made it a sort of easy, gentle, loving, yet very clear read for women who are struggling with making the decision.
And Anthony, that's really great. Actually, I think, and this is totally anecdotal, that the studies show, but I've read, but I couldn't tell you where, that on average, it takes women 4 years to decide whether or not decide to divorce, and it takes men 10 years. So at 5 years, this kind of makes sense. More women make that decision than men, and they make it faster, but they still don't make it fast. And I've had a lot of clients say, and I bet you've heard this too, I wish you would just hit me or have an affair or something, and then that would give me a reason to divorce, and that wouldn't be like just my choice. Does
That's
that
right.
ring true?
Absolutely. That's what I mean, where it's like, does it rise to the level? Is it bad enough? And the line moves, right? Because I have worked with women whose husbands do hit them, and they are still equally confused as somebody who says, I just wish he'd hit me. So we're waiting for that magical moment when I think what needs to happen is that we need to really look inward, trust ourselves, right? And unfortunately, we live in a society that is sort of much of it is built on women being taught to not trust themselves and their instincts and their intuition or their needs or their wants or their desires. You want too much, you're asking too much, you're too needy, all of these things. When in reality, I think we are our own best knowledge bases. We know who we are, what we want, what we need. We just need more permission to trust the choices that we want to make. Also, if there are children involved, as mothers, it's drilled into us, early on in our own childhoods that we sacrifice everything for our family and that our own needs and wants are far less important than the stability of a family or children or whatever else. And so there's a whole host of reasons that this decision is really confusing for women.
All right. So tell us about the Should I Stay or Should I Go program that you put together.
Yeah, well, the program came before the book and they're somewhat similar in content. My work in helping women make this decision is broken into three main categories. The program is an online program where it's full of videos and worksheets, but the main three sections are the first section because the way that we're conditioned is we're looking at them, is what they're doing bad enough, is, are they a bad husband, are they worth divorce, whatever it is, right? We're focused on them. And so the first thing I do, the very first module, which is full of many videos, is about you. It's about reconnecting with that part of yourself that actually does know what you want, what you need, what you love, what you value, what matters to you. And again, because we just have been so conditioned to disconnect from that part of ourselves. So the whole first part of the program is about reconnecting with that part of yourself. So that then when we move into the second section, which is sort of more interpersonal education about communication and healthy relationships, we're doing it from a place of self knowledge and self understanding and self expression, where now that has somewhere to land and fit, as opposed to it just sort of being a bit conceptual. If we've really done the work to understand who we are, then when we start examining relationships and relationship patterns and dynamics and exploring topics of emotional abuse or things like that, we know when something is landing that actually is true for us. So we first open that container in order to begin to with more information. And then the third part is really about, I think most people want to know before they get divorced, like, okay, well, what's it really like? Like, am I going to get support? Will I have any money? Will I, he says that he's going to take the children from me. Can he do that? Right? All of these questions that we really need answers to before we start to move forward into it. So we get into all of that as well in the program.
It sounds like a really, really great program. And I know that you use neuroscience and coaching tools to help clients get clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, I think that so many people that I've spoken to in the divorce coaching world say something that I think is really bad advice, which is treat your divorce like a business deal,
Good.
which is like, I think, both impossible and also just bad advice. And so I'd love to hear, Kate, your take on that and what your reasons are before I just tell you mine.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love this question. I mean, look, it's not, I think eventually, and maybe this is what they mean, I'm not quite sure. Eventually you get to the point where you become emotionally what I want for my clients is for them to become emotionally disconnected from a lot of the process so that they can be more strategic and maybe business minded about certain decisions that they're making. If we go into the divorce process, I mean, you and I both know if you go into court, an emotional basket case trying to get fairness and just get somebody to understand my plight, like it's all going to fall apart. Like there's no place for that in court and in negotiation, right? So we do have to lead with our brains and not as much our hearts and emotions. But this is not a business deal. This is emotional. It is your heart. It is, right, which is why the most important thing that I really advise people is to not rush the process because I say ad nauseum, we're making the biggest legal and financial decisions of our lives in the midst of the biggest emotional upheaval of our lives. And it's a terrible combination. So let's process the emotions first. Let's really get, like, do not file for divorce when you're in a rage, when you're right. Don't force, if you're the one who's initiating and you drop the bomb and you tell your spouse that this is what is happening, don't then go file the next day and force them into a process when they are still reeling from this information, no matter how many times you've told them that this is coming. When they actually hear you say it, they're still going to be blindsided and feel like they never saw it coming. Right? We want all of that emotion to be processed through and sort of taken the emotional heat out of it before we start making all of these legal and financial decisions. And also, they're all emotional decisions. Your children, if your children are involved, right, you are making these decisions from an emotional, and yeah, I don't think you can divorce it entirely. Is what I'm
No.
saying. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it.
Let me first remind people that I'm Katherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues, a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce-related topics so that everyone can divorce with dignity. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Kate Anthony. She's the author of The D Word and helps women work through divorce-related issues. Well, I think, Kate, in answering my own question, that two things. One, I think that my understanding is that we make decisions, all decisions, in the emotional part of the brain. So that
Mm-hmm.
trying to say that the decisions are not emotional is just not how it works,
Right. That's a very good
right?
point. Right.
And I think that emotions have a lot to teach us
Mhm.
about what it is that is our true values, our real concerns. And if you lean into
Yes.
those emotions to understand yourself better and even understand maybe the other person and the situation better, and not react, but really work on what it is that's going on, that you really have the opportunity to uncover your own priorities and possibly the priorities of the other person to get to a better result. So that's one piece of it.
Absolutely agree. Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
And another part of it is that business deals are emotional.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Right.
So, right.
Right. Uh-huh.
And like, I think people feel extremely emotional about many, many business deals. So the idea, even buying a car is an emotional thing, right? Oh, I'm not going to get it. They don't have the color I want. Oh my God, I really want it, but I don't have the money. I mean, all of that just makes my heart beats faster just thinking about it. So like,
Right.
it's real. And that's not that big of a deal most of the time, really, when you think about it. So I think it's just not good advice. I do think that there has to come a time in the divorce process where you take a hard look at the numbers, right? And that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you make rational decisions about the numbers that are not based on that emotional reactivity, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
instance,
Mm-hmm.
can I
Mm-hmm.
stay in the house? Can I afford to stay here? What is my lifestyle cost? And will I be able to maintain at least the bones of that lifestyle going forward? And if not, what do I need to do in order to make that close that gap? Or what adjustments am I going to make so that isn't so painful? These
That's
are,
right.
I think, what people think of as like business like deals. And you need to be able to do that, right? That
Sure.
doesn't mean
Yes.
that your emotions, I choose to not go out to dinner so much and go on one really big vacation a year. Like that's an emotional choice. There isn't a right or wrong about that. I choose that. You might choose the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do a staycation and eat out and go to concerts. I mean, I'm not saying that those are decisions that anyone should or would have to make, but they do. And
Yeah.
so I think that, and so I do think that there are emotional preferences, your preferences are definitely relevant to the
Yeah.
negotiation and being able to get the support and take the time you need to really understand the finances as one element of a very complex negotiation.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I think what's really important in this that you alluded to is that when you do the work to ground into yourself, which is the first third of my book and my program, when you do the work to ground into yourself in an effective way, you are then able to be at choice, right? You're then able to process, okay, this is emotional, right? And I can choose. I can be more objective. I can name the emotions. I can, rather than being swept by the emotions, rather than being governed by them, I can say, oh, I'm feeling really excited about this idea, or this idea scares the bejesus out of me. I'm not sure I can do it. What more information do I need? Right. But when you are grounded in your own emotions, you don't have to be governed by them. That doesn't mean that it's not emotional. It means that you're a choice.
Exactly. I've heard a distinction made between emotion and feeling. Emotion being the
Mm.
physiological reaction we have to something that might scare or excite us, and the feelings of what we do with that emotion. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I mean, being able to
Yes.
observe your own emotion and then your own feeling reaction to it and sort of think, well, what's going on with me? That's one of the things I love to ask myself when I'm alone in the car, usually. I'll say, if I'm really anxious or worried about something, what's up with that, Catherine? And
Yeah,
then answer my own question and see what it is that I say.
that's right. Yes, I totally agree. I absolutely agree. And there are decisions that we have to make in this process that are really emotional. Leaving your house is very emotional. It also might be the best choice.
Totally.
And if you're just overwhelmingly like, I can't leave my home or I can't take my children out of my home, and there's no discernment, you might make a really, really bad financial decision that will be far more emotionally terrifying down the line if you actually can't afford your mortgage.
Exactly. That's exactly
Hmm.
right. So I know
Yeah.
that you emphasize, I love the way you phrase this, putting children at the center and not in the middle. Can you
Mhm.
tell us how you make that distinction and how
Mhm.
parents can apply it in their actual lives?
Yeah, that came from my mediator when I got divorced, and he had us write out a vision statement for our divorce, and it really was centering our son in all decisions. So every decision gets filtered through the lens of what's best for my kid, regardless of what's best for me or what I want, right? And there were some really difficult things that my ex and I would get into these, some, I don't know, not like power struggles, but just some struggles over something. And then as soon as we pulled back and our mediator said, hold on a second, what's best for Emmett? It was so clear that it was going to suck for me or it was going to suck for my ex, but it was definitely best for Emmett. And that was always the right choice every single time. And when we put our kids in the middle, we use them as weapons, we use them as pawns, we fight over them, right? As opposed to standing, like it's as if you've got one parent on either side and they're pulling at the child, right? That's putting them in the middle. Putting them at the center is you've got two parents who are standing side by side going, okay, we've got this whole reconfiguration to work out, but we are the team figuring out how to solve this problem in service of this other individual who never asked to be here.
Yeah. Kate, I think it sometimes is challenging when parents genuinely disagree what's in the
Hmm.
best interest of the child or children. And,
Sure.
and I remember actually running into a forensic psychologist in a restaurant years ago and saying, hey, what would you say to anyone who's getting divorced and had a disagreement about children? And he said, making the wrong decision as parents is better than fighting about it.
I love that. I love that.
Yes, your children
Yes,
are going to survive a mistake you made because we all make mistakes,
that's right.
right? And so, but fighting about it, especially ongoing, protracted fighting, is you just know that's going to be really bad. I'm just wondering what you think about that.
I love that as a concept, and I think I'm going to steal it from you. I will credit you because no, I think absolutely right. And that's why I always have my clients put in their parenting plan that they are going to revisit the parenting plan in a year and at every major transition for the children, right? Because look, if it's not working, it's not working. If it was a mistake, cool, let's revisit it. Another thing I always say is hungry parents can't feed children. So if there's something in the parenting plan and the custody schedule or anything that is not working for one parent, it's not working. And we have to figure now, there's often these times where it's like, well, it works for me. And you have somebody who is not cooperative. There's someone who's going to be more high conflict, someone who, anytime you say something's not working for you, they're going to dig in even stronger because they love that for you. So, all of that notwithstanding, if you've got two parents who are genuinely putting the children at the center and are genuinely concerned with their children's well being, not as it serves them and their own purposes, then you approach something and say, you know what, we tried this for a while, and guess what? It's not working. I am drowning. I thought I could pick up the slack on this, but I really can't because my job is suffering, right? There are ways in which you really do need to revisit, but at least start off with a plan. Just start off with a plan. As long as you have things built in to revisit and there is open communication around these things, absolutely.
You're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Katherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Kate Anthony. She's the author of the D Word and a program of a similar title. And Kate, if people want to learn more about you or about your book, how can they do that?
Everything, the best place to find me is on my website, which is kateanthony.com. And I am over on Instagram at kateanthony_divorce coach. And my podcast is on all platforms. But if you go to my website, it'll take you anywhere you need to go.
That's great. So, I always say that divorce is at the intersection between what was and what will be. And you talk about being at the crossroads, which I think a pretty similar analogy.
Totally.
And so in order to plan what will be, right, you need to start to really understand your own goals, your own priorities, what your values are about that. And sometimes people feel really shaken by the unwinding of the marriage, which wasn't necessarily bad all along, but has not been fulfilling, at least for the last few years. Apparently, it's 4 or 5 years if you're a woman.
Right.
Right. And so, what patterns have you noticed, or what helps those people ultimately get enough of confidence and peace of mind to make that plan for what will be in the future?
I think doing the work, for example, if you follow my sort of, template and the work that I prescribe for trying to make the decision, you're kind of primed for it already. But if you get to the other side and you're like, oh no, I don't know who I am anymore, I'm lost and confused, it's the same work. Right. But I do think it is vitally important work to do to figure out who you are now. You're not the same person you were before you got married. You're not the same person on a molecular level that you were before you had children. So there's so much that has changed. And so it's okay to let go of these, like, oh, I used to like to knit, and like, I haven't knitted in 15 years. Do I actually want to knit anymore? Is that something that actually fits in my life now? No, maybe not, right? Like, it's okay to ask those questions and to let go and to think of this as a reinvention. And sometimes we look at this work as if it's like, oh God, it's so daunting and I have to go to therapy and I have to get a coach and I have to do all this work. It's like, it's actually kind of cool. Like, you're getting to know yourself as if you're getting to know someone that you just start dating, right? You get curious, you ask questions, maybe you grab a journal and you ask the questions of yourself that maybe somebody would ask you if they were getting to know you on a date, or that you would ask someone else you were dating. What do you like to do for fun? I remember when I got divorced, people would say, what do you like to do for fun? And I would be so paralyzed. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. Okay, well, let's find out. Let's go, that's a great opportunity to do something like the artist's way, where you go take yourself on artist dates, take yourself to the museum, take yourself bowling, take yourself, learn who you are now, and think of it as a more of a fun exploration than this like daunting task, right? There's lots of things that you can do to begin this process. And also don't skip over the grieving process part of it, because there is grief in letting go who you once were, what you thought your life was going to be. All of that is relevant and an important part of the journey. The getting to know yourself and who you are now can be sort of the fun.
So I want to circle back to where we were at the beginning of the show, which is the decision to divorce. And for longtime listeners or listeners to previous episodes might know that I was the first person in my family to ever get divorced. And when I got married for the first time, my grandmother pulled me aside and she said, Katherine, you can never get divorced. I was ironically a divorce lawyer at the time. And this is not a religious thing or anything like this. It's just family culture. And she
Sure.
said, no, no, you can never get married. You can never get divorced because family comes first, which to her meant that I had to stay married to the father of my children, which I didn't have any at the time, but then I did. Luckily for me, I didn't have to explain myself because she'd passed away by the time I did get divorced. But I really come from this culture where family means staying married. And at the time I said to her, listen, if I'm unhappy, I'm going to get divorced. And for me, making that decision to get divorced was really about thinking that when my parents passed away and my children left the nest, that I would be left alone with this guy for the rest of my life, and that didn't seem like a good thing to me. And
That's
and
right.
and I also didn't want my children to think this is what marriage should be.
100%.
And so I'm wondering what else you would say to people who are unhappy in their marriages. And I don't think you should get divorced at the first fight, right? I think you should work
Oh,
at it. You really should
sure.
spend some time examining what's going on in the marriage, not to be like, all right, that's it, I'm out of here. But for someone who feels paralyzed by the fear of breaking up the family or the shame or what they might perceive as the stigma of divorce, which, by the way, so many people are divorced that there might be a perceived stigma, but it's not really a thing, I don't think. Anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why we call it the D word, right? It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, it's like we don't say the word cancer, right? Ooh, it's obscene, right? The stigma is so made up, I think. And one of the things I say to my clients is exactly what you just said. I always say to them, is this the person you want to walk off into the sunset with when the kids are grown? When they're off in college, is this the person that you want to be like on the front porch in your rocking chair with, And they're like, oh God, no. I'm like, okay, well, let's think about that. And then the other thing I always say is that, you know what, like, this is it. This is your life, right? I always quote Mary Oliver, this is your one wild and precious life. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? This is it. Like, why are you going to spend it miserable? Truly. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. And I think most people, if people were just like leaving at the first fight kind of thing, it wouldn't be taking us an average of 5 years to make this decision, right? Like, by the time people make the decision to get divorced, while it may be a shock to the family and all these things, it's been brewing for a very long time. If anybody's listening to this who has not been divorced for whatever reason, you're listening and you're listening for friends or to try and understand your friends, just give them some grace that they have been agonizing over this for longer than you will ever know. And I think that we all collectively need to give ourselves and each other a little bit more grace and a break for this. But you deserve to be happy. We deserve to live this one life in a way that makes us happy. And the other thing I say that you just mentioned too is, you know, is this the relationship you want for your children? And if it's not, and usually my clients are very clear, God, no. And I say, okay, then, because
Right.
this is the blueprint you're handing them.
This is what you're teaching them is the way it should be. And
That's right.
that's definitely not where I want it to be.
And you don't get to say, well, honey, this isn't healthy, or you don't, I don't want this for you. Like, you don't get to say that and not do anything about it because you're still modeling it. You're still showing it to them. And yeah, and if it's toxic, it is far better. The idea that divorce is bad for children has been very, very widely debunked. Divorce is not bad for children. Toxicity is. Because up until recent years, divorce was so toxic all the time before we had wide no-fault divorce law, we had to put our children in the middle, drag them through the mud, drag the other parent through the mud, prove infidelity, prove abuse, all these things that our children didn't need to know anything about. And it was often not true, but like, that's the only way you could do it. But so that creates toxicity. That's bad for kids. A collaborative divorce in which little c collaborative, but a collaborative divorce in which we are amicable and we're really trying to do our best for the children is absolutely okay. Are they going to be impacted? Of course they are. They're not, robots, but they'll be okay. And they might even be better off because they're going to see their parents in better lights and better healthy relationships. Even if only one person is the safe person, even if the other parent is still toxic and all of the things, you cannot control that. But the studies have shown that it only takes one safe parent, one safe home in which I always talk about you're giving your children the gift of perspective, right? So when you create one home, even if the other home is toxic, they get to go and their nervous systems get to escalate. They get to regulate themselves. They get to feel safe and they get to understand the difference between safety and toxicity. If they're in the toxicity all the time, they have no perspective.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. Kate Anthony, this has been a great conversation, but we're out of time. So I just want to thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues.
Thank you so much for having me, Katherine. It's been a pleasure.